Bible glimpses. Bible glimpses.
Jesus raised the dead a few times while he walked this earth. That he only raised a few wasn't because he couldn't raise all of them, but that wasn't his purpose in these miracles. That time will come in the future. One of those occasions has always touched my heart while reading it. It's the raising of the widow's son in Luke. In many cases, Jesus was asked to perform the miracle, but in this case, he encounters the funeral procession and simply stops it and raises the boy. Beginning a reading in verse 12. Now, as he approached the gate of the city, behold, a dead man was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow, and a sizable crowd from the city was with her. And when the Lord saw her, he felt compassion for her and said to her, "Do not weep." And he came up and touched the coffin, and the bearers came to a halt. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." And the dead man sat up and began to speak. And Jesus gave him back to his mother. That Jesus raised the dead should speak volumes and fill us with awe. It certainly got those people's attention. But I want to focus on an interesting coincidence in the wording of this account. The next verse says, "And fear gripped them all, and they began glorifying God, saying, A great prophet has arisen among us, and God has visited his people." The word they use for a great prophet having arisen among them is the same word Jesus used in his command to the young man to arise. Some might say it's not a coincidence, but I have no reason to think it's otherwise. But I do want to make a point on this coincidence. Jesus commands the boy to arise, but Jesus is a great prophet who had arisen among them. The interesting thing I want to highlight here is the fact that both risings were miraculous in nature. Obviously, a boy raised from the dead was a miracle, but Jesus was also a miracle. Some would say Jesus was just another prophet among the people. But Scripture tells us that Jesus was Emmanuel, God with us. As Paul wrote in Colossians 2:9, "For in him all the fullness of deity dwells in bodily form." And John wrote in John 1 and verse 14 that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. Glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. God dwelling among us in human form, truly a miracle had arisen that had never before been proclaimed.